Well, hello. If you're just tuning in, we're at chapter 2_7 right now. You can always tune into the Intro to 360 Mettle chapter 2_5 on project to follow along, and there's a chapter 2.7 sequence located in the sequences folder. But I suggest that you go back to the beginning of this chapter because you'll get a lot of useful information. What we're about to talk about is trimming basics inside of Premiere Pro. And the first thing that you should know, we're going to cover two things in this lesson. One is what's included with the default selection tool. The next thing that we're going to look at is removing things from our timeline using some in and out points. With our default selection tool, you should note that in Premiere Pro, when you move over the edit point of a clip, and what I mean by edit point is when you cut from one clip to another, you can get there easily by pressing the Shift key and dragging your playhead. Just a great way to get to the edit point. And in this particular relationship, let me press the equal sign to zoom in. This is known as what's called the outgoing clip. This is known as the incoming clip. Some people call this the A side of the edit and the B side. This is an extremely important relationship, as in how we cut from one thing to another determines how our audience responds. And if you cut too harshly, people might be thrown out of the story. So this is something that we want to keep in mind, is that usually we're going to want to do or use a couple editing techniques to refine our piece and have people be brought into our story rather than thrown out because we haven't cut it properly. So that's the relationship. And Premiere Pro knows that. It knows it so much that in your default selection tool, which you've been using this entire time, this arrow, the V key, if I hover over the A or B side of the edit, this is known as an Overwrite Trim. Where it falls short is if I tried to extend the length of this clip, there's more information in this clip based besides just the in and out points that we made on it. I can't do that. And the other thing I can't do is if I start to trim this clip, let's say I wanted to make it shorter. If I drag it and move it to the right, a gap is left in its place. And then I have to select the gap and I have to delete it. And that's just a pain. It just involves a lot of time that I could have spent doing other things like spending on my creativity to create amazing 360 VR projects. Let me press Control Z followed by Control Z again, and then also press the / key so you get an overview of our project. Besides this Overwrite Trim tool, which is somewhat limited, if I hover over the edit point, I'm on the outgoing clip. If I hold down the Control key before selecting it, I get what's called the ripple trim. What's amazing about this is if I make this clip a little bit shorter, just draw your attention to the program monitor for a second, where you'll see both the A side and B side of the edit. What you'll see is that as I shorten the length of the clip on the left-hand side, it becomes shorter. I get a little duration display that tells me that I'm shortening this clip by a certain duration of 3 seconds and 6 frames. Okay? Now it's 2 seconds and 17 frames. You can see that frame update in the program monitor as well. Besides being able to shorten this, if I decided to make this clip a little bit longer, as long as this clip had handles, and what I mean by handles is any of the information that is attached to this clip that's currently just not showing on the timeline. So the stuff beyond the in and out point that you made. If a clip has handles, you can access them and make this clip longer. And what's great about this is if I extend the length of this clip, so I'm going to release my mouse right now, it'll get longer, and all the clips adjacent to it, to the right of it, are going to ripple down the timeline. And everything's kept together. That's exactly what you want. And this is built into the default selection tool. So let me press Control Z to undo that. I'm going to move to the next edit point. So I'm going to just drag my playhead and use the Shift key to snap to the edit point. And let's just say I wanted to trim a couple frames off this shot right here of the waterfall. Okay? I want to basically have it end right here. I'm just going to move to the edit point, and I'm going to press equals just to kind of zoom in a bit. And I'll move over the incoming clip. I'll hold down the Control key, and I'll click and drag inward. And you'll see what's going to happen here. This clip is going to become shorter. In fact, its new duration is going to be 7 seconds and 4 frames. I'm trimming off 1 second and 24 frames off the head of it. Notice the changes taking place inside your program monitor. Once I release the mouse, followed by that key, that actually becomes a lot shorter. You may be asking yourself, well, That ripple tool seems really handy. I would probably prefer to use it a little bit more than the overwrite tool, leaving gaps in its place. Well, I'm glad you asked because you can. If you head to the Edit menu and go to Preferences, under Preferences there is a Trim section. And in that Trim section is your ability to allow the selection tool to choose the ripple trims without the modifier key. All this does is it reverses the operation. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to press OK. So now what happens? As I move over, let's say, the in point of the incoming clip and click, notice how the ripple tool is selected automatically. If I drag to the right, I can snap to my playhead's position, shortening the length of the clip by a certain amount to a new duration of 5 seconds and 10 frames. Noticing how that updates inside my program monitor, I can then release my mouse. And I can then trim really efficiently, keeping my entire sequence kept together. So you can reverse those operations if you need the overwrite trim for whatever reason, and sometimes you're going to, especially if you have multiple tracks of clips. If you hold down the Control key now, it accesses that overwrite trim instead of the ripple trim. They're just reversed. And it's as simple as going to the Edit menu under your Preferences to reverse those operations. Another way to, let's say, trim content out of the timeline is to actually create in and out points. And I use this in periods of time where I look at my overall piece and decide, you know what? I really just don't like that entire 10 seconds that's taking place. And that 10 seconds that I'm referring to might involve multiple clips. So take a look here. Maybe I've decided from this point of the waterfall and a little bit into this clip, I really just don't like it. So what I'm going to do is create an in point right here by pressing I in the timeline. I'm going to move my playhead a little bit further, and then I'm going to press O to make an out point. This in and out point defines what I can now remove from the timeline. And the best part about it is I can either lift it, which means leave a gap. I can, of course, select that gap and then delete it. I'll press Control Z to undo. And I can also extract it. And extract it is going to basically remove that material without leaving a gap in its place. Either way, it could be an efficient way for removing a lot of material at once rather than by simply trimming just one clip. I just press Control Z to undo. And in fact, I'm going to clear those in and out points on my timeline by right-clicking and choosing Clear In and Out. So there you have it, a couple different ways to trim inside of Premiere Pro. You've got that built-in overwrite and ripple trim inside the default selection tool, as well as your ability to just add in and out points around a certain area and either lift and extract it from the timeline,